Hi, welcome back from the break. I'm Louise Isola. I'm the assistant editor here at Business Insurance. I'm going to introduce the moderator for the next panel. It's Kirsten Early. She's the managing director at Broadspire UK. She, along with the panelists, are in London right now, and I will turn it over to you, Kirsten. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. As Louise said, my name is Kirsten Early, and I feel really privileged to chair this conversation today entitled Young Professionals, a Working and Changing Workplace and the Future of Work. This panel of young professionals are going to present a really fresh perspective, hopefully, on the changing face of the workplace. Flexible hours, working from home, virtual meetings, they were all important components of what many members of this generation have desired, and now it's actually a reality. So what will the future bring for our workforce? Please allow me to introduce our panelists today. First, we have William Jones. He's a client liaison manager for the Lloyd's and London market, based within the global client development team of Crawford & Company. Will joined Crawford in 2013, and in recent times, in November of 2018, he was appointed as the client liaison manager for the Lloyd's and London market, focused on managing and growing Crawford & Company's relationships with key stakeholders in this distinct marketplace. Will acts as a single point of entry for this market into the global Crawford organization for inquiries about Crawford solutions. In addition, we're privileged to have Shireen Scott, who entered the insurance industry through an internship with AIG. She then joined the graduate program in the internal audit function, providing assurance in areas such as investments, operations, and line of businesses operating in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Shireen has also been a project manager at AIG on projects pivotal to business transformation and change. She has a degree in law, a master's in international business, international diploma in governance, risk, and compliance, and is a professional member of the ICA. Shireen also sits on the steering committee of the Afro-Caribbean Insurance Network and is passionate about promoting diversity and inclusion within the insurance market. Thanks both for joining us today, and welcome. I'd like to start by throwing out some research and stereotypes around millennials. Millennials are obviously born in the years 1981 to 1996, which sadly I am not a part of, but you both are. And in a study put out by PwC, the group president for Asia for Procter & Gamble made a really interesting statement. What she said was, the workplace and workforce are going to change pretty dramatically as we look forward. The entire concept of work is going to become more flexible. The skills needed in the workforce are going to be less about IQ and a little bit more about EQ. Because if you think about it, a lot of IQ knowledge is going to be available at our fingertips through handheld devices and the computer and technologies we have at our disposal. I think this study is really interesting because in the past, so much of getting jobs and being successful in the workforce has really been kind of centered around and focused on your resume and your IQ and your background. So if there's a shift now to EQ, do you think that changes the dynamic for a younger workforce moving forward? Does it open any doors? Does it close them? So perhaps I can start with you, Shireen, on that one.
Thank you, Kirsten. I think, to be honest, it's always about a focus of emotional intelligence. That's the main thing that is EQ. And as you said, with IQ, you already have that with computers. Google is our best friend these days. So that focus is pretty much gone. And I've already seen a shift in it as well. If you've gone through an internship interview or graduate scheme interview, the questions they ask you are always about how you react to situations now. And it's also always about scenarios that you might find yourself in the workplace. And that's because that's mostly the focus now. A business can have a strategy, but it's how you react to actually make that strategy work. And as we know, we're always going to come across hurdles. So you have to know how you can adapt very fast and also to the point that you're actually doing what the business need. So yeah, I completely agree. I think there is a major shift, but the most thing that's really beneficial for millennials and the generation X and Z that are now coming up is that adaptability is something that is just on our fingertips. I don't think you'll find many of us that find it difficult to adapt. And I think that's genuinely because of the way society is. If we look at like social economy, everything that's currently happening at this moment in time means that we're constantly needing to adapt and think of new ideas and new strategies, not just for the where we work, but also our own lives. And I think because of that, it's made it a lot easier. So yeah, it is changing, and there is 100% a major shift on EQ. But I think that millennials and others are finding it much easier than we probably don't even look at it like that anymore. It's just different now. We're just like the next day, like, this has changed. Okay, let's go forward with it. And you know, another thing I wanted to also add is also, I think now that a lot of millennials and the younger generation also have a lot of passion about responsibility, not just for ourselves, but for the community and the world. That's why you hear us talking a lot more about global warming and things like that. Because yes, it's going to be in our future, but we're just becoming a lot more passionate. And I think that code of conduct and that ethic that we have within ourselves for things that aren't even included really in business is something that we are bringing to the workplace as well. Not because we're forced to, but just because it's actually naturally coming out of us. So again, yes, we're moving forward, but I think we're going to be okay.
Will, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball then, because Shireen said something really interesting, right, around adaptability. And I think, you know, that's a really interesting topic, because I think, especially, I'm not that much older than you, but I am, but even generations above me as well, right? I think there's always been a stigma around the fact that we're not as adaptable. We didn't grow up, you know, I didn't have a cell phone growing up. I didn't have my first cell phone until I was, you know, I don't even know, 21 or 22 years old. I didn't grow up with a computer at my fingertips. And so, you know, building on that question a little bit around the EQ and kind of expanding on it from an adaptability perspective, do you think that that's a part of what makes your generation tick, right? You know, is that you're perhaps maybe more adaptable than some of us in the older generations, or do you think that perhaps you're bringing us along on that journey?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kirsten. And Shireen, it's really interesting. I think adaptability is a given, quite frankly, in our generation. I kind of find the idea mad, and I suppose it's already in all of our careers, the idea that you almost do one thing for your entire career. You go in with one skill set and you hone it for the next 40 years. To me, seems like something that's maybe a thing of the past. It's as much now about working in different parts of businesses, doing different things. As I say, I began my career out investigating claims. I spent the next couple of years running projects internally, and now I'm on the client side. I think that adaptability is, I think, what keeps us interested. I think as a generation, we love projects, and I think when we finish a project, I think you want to find the next one. So yeah, I can't emphasize enough, I think, how important I think adaptability in the workplace is, and I think it's probably what motivates all of us to keep coming in every day, because there's lots of the world you can go and see these days. So I think finding something that keeps work fresh every day, yeah, crucial.
I think you're right about that. I think that's what we see a lot in that younger generation, right? It's kind of keep you on your toes a little bit, but also to keep kind of the changing work environment that you're all in. So when we look at the changing workforce, right? I think as of 2020, 50% of our workforce falls into a millennial bracket. That's a big number, right, when you think about it. And one of the key themes we hear so much about, and especially with the pandemic, you know, is work-life balance. I think this balance probably means different things to different generations. So I would like to kind of maybe dig in on that a little bit with both of you, and to kind of get your views on this. So Will, I'll start with you. Do you think that pre-pandemic there was a healthy work-life balance for your generation? And what does that actually mean to you around having a work-life balance?
So I think I'll start by answering the second part first. I think to kind of define what that means, certainly to me, and I guess others in my generation, is to me a work-life balance is about being able to have a workload that typically you can complete within your hours. I think the idea that we all understand that it does get busy and there's going to be times where you're up against the wall and you're working long hours, but I think there's probably a general expectation that the correct balance is if you work 40 hours a week, you should roughly have 40 hours a week worth of work. Again, that there will be exceptions to that. I think coming out of being a generation where so many of us have come out of university as well, I think our concepts of work-life balance when you first come out of university is probably a bit of a wake-up call for many. I recall doing 3 or 4 hours a day at university felt like I was the hardest working person on the planet, and then you land in the workspace and you realise 7-8 hour days is the norm. So I think certainly for me that there has always been a good balance. I think the way technology plays into our life is probably the part which impacts work-life balance the most, and that's probably because we can't help ourselves to look at our phones. So I think if you're giving a work phone and you get emails, our natural inclination with any message we see is to process it and try and respond to it. And I think a lot of the time we can create more work for ourselves as a generation, because an email comes in, we respond, we ping it back, an email comes back again. I think kind of long gone are the days where something comes in the post, you sit down, you read it, you have a think about it, you pen something, you stick it on your desk, and you might send it back the next day. So from my personal experiences, I've always found that there is a fairly good work-life balance once you're used to the shock of the workplace. But I do think technology is increasingly eating into that. I mean, holidays, again, is another thing where there's no expectation for us to answer our phones, but I'm sure we all find ourselves peeking at them and then have to slap ourselves on the wrist.
I would say I think that's also a difference between the US and the UK, and coming from somebody that there is a different dynamic from the idea of holiday over here versus in the US. So I do think we're a bit lucky living on this side of the pond for many reasons today, actually. So, but anyway, thank you for that. Shireen, if I could go to you, a little bit of a different question. Post-pandemic, right? So I wish we were in post-pandemic, frankly, and I think 6 months ago, many of us thought we might be by now, but we're not. But you know, when this is all said and done, and we've all had to rely on technology, and we're not in an office, we don't get to see our colleagues except for via this screen. To Will's point, the technology takes over. I know from my own experience, it's 8, 9, 10 hours a day sitting on Teams with absolutely no breaks, you know, and constantly being on a video and things like that. You know, do you think that after this is all said and done, and maybe perhaps we're back in an office or not, do you think the brick and mortar idea, you know, of having offices and having that is going to shift at all? And how can companies, you know, keep you and me and everybody else happy, really, with a suitable work-life balance once we get past this pandemic?
I actually love this question, and the reason I love this question is because it's insurance. And as we know, insurance is actually quite traditional. So even if you want to work from home, you know, there's that tradition of going from business and building to building and communicating, a lot of meetings. And so it's a difficult one, because I think that absolutely there's going to be a shift. I just don't know what that shift is going to be. And one thing I've realized is that I actually miss that part of the traditional insurance vibe. You know, when it gets to about midday and there's the rush and, you know, everyone's out and the underwriters are out, and then Lloyd's of London starts to get busy, and there's just so much going on. And I think that is what makes insurance what it is, especially in the London market. And I don't think a lot of us would want to lose that too much. But saying that, I definitely think there will be a major shift, and we'll see a lot more people working from home, possibly on the Thursdays and the Fridays. You know, I think within the insurance tradition, those days have been a lot more relaxed anyway. So I think that the pandemic will basically just kickstart that, basically, and just get that running, where it was walking before, now it's running. And, you know, within the role that I am in AIG, we've actually been very flexible prior to COVID. So our transition from being in the office to working from home was shockingly smooth for many departments, because we had all experienced working from home before. Some people were already working once a day from home, some here and there, but we had all experienced it. So once it came to doing our job from home, it was pretty much okay. Like by 2 months, there was a couple of tech issues. Maybe the systems were on overload because it couldn't take how many people were online. But once they started to get that sorted, it was actually okay. And it was actually surprising to see how well everyone adapted to the way things are now. And it was quite a positive feeling as well, because where we're not used to certain things, fear very easily creeps in, and that might be the way you do your job, or the way you view the company. But being able to see such an easy transition through such a crazy time happening in the world really did reduce the impact of fear, and I think it made a lot of people be able to do their job a lot easier. So if they do say to us, we've decided that only this amount of people are going to be on these sets of days, or they say actually we decide that certain departments don't need to be in at all unless they have meetings, again, I don't think anyone would be surprised, and I think everyone would adapt quite quickly to that. So I welcome it. I do welcome it. And but what I do hope is that traditional insurance vibe that we have within London doesn't go anywhere, because it is something that we all, I think, kind of hold dear to our hearts. Even though it's great to be at home sometimes, it is nice to have that vibe.
I think I have to give probably, your age demographic and younger a lot of credit, just in my own experience, having, a very large operation. I think it was a much easier transition for my younger staff versus an older demographic of staff that hasn't been used to ever working from home and has been sitting and doing claims in an office, in a team environment. Never having to use Teams. I mean, how many tutorials we had to give on how to use the technology, etc. I think you guys definitely probably showed up a little bit more, probably because of what you're used to in some sense. So that kind of takes me into a little bit of a next topic, right? Because technology dominates every aspect of your lives. You guys grew up with it, you went to school with it, you've probably had a phone since you were pretty young. So it's probably not really surprising to hear that 41% of your demographic say they prefer to communicate electronically at work than even face-to-face or even over the telephone, right? So the lack of being able to pick up a phone sometimes and talk to people. It said in a study that we read, millennials routinely make use of their own technology at work, and 3/4 believe that access to technology makes them more effective at work. However, technology is often a catalyst for intergenerational conflict in the workplace, and many millennials feel held back by rigid or outdated working styles. So maybe we get a bit controversial here, but do you think that being at home full time has changed the direction of workplace and environment you are in and the employee engagement? Has there been an impact on your psychosocial, and how does that impact you guys as a younger demographic? I think we've touched on this a bit more, but to kind of go a little bit deeper, right, into that topic around, there is a bit of conflict probably between an older and a younger generation and what's expected, but also, does that play on you, right, as a younger member of a team, and as a younger member of the demographic, being at home all the time and not having that access, and maybe there is that conflict. So Will, if I could start with you with that and your thoughts.
Yeah, I think one of the strange things of the workplace as a first coming into it was always this kind of expectation of who's there first and who's out last. And as I play it into kind of the world we're in, I mean, I'm very much about it's all about delivering on your outputs. If you deliver your outputs, I think the amount of time it takes for you to do that should largely be irrelevant as long as you're available and you can deliver. That said, I do find myself looking at my Teams to check my kind of green light is on to show I am available. So I'm obviously partially buying into that. the thing I find really interesting about moving from kind of the analog to the digital workplace is it's kind of attritional in the technology world, in terms of I'm a firm believer work has to be fun. We spend far too much of our lives working for it to be something that is kind of super serious all the time. And transitioning into this environment where, by and large, the way we contact people is we send them a chat message in Teams, or we jump on a call with them. The interactions you have in an office, from bumping into someone in the hallway, being in the lift with them for 5 minutes, whatever it is, allows you to break down some of those boundaries, and sometimes you can bounce questions, get a bit of information off each other. I find in this world, it's more focused around everything has to have a purpose to it. So if I feel less comfortable, in a strange way, just ringing somebody up just to have a random chat, whereas in my day-to-day job in business as usual, it's something I deal with. I'd be doing it multiple times a day, just getting to know different people, learn about their personality. So I think the sharing of ideas is clearly damaged. I think would I want to be fresh out of university coming into work now? No, not really, because I think you'd feel at huge disadvantage getting to know everybody in the office. I think it's very difficult to really know what somebody's like over the phone. I think in person, how tall people are, anything, there's just things you pick up, people's mannerisms. There's all kind of things that you really learn about them, and you do lose that, and it can be harder to break down those boundaries so that you can start to have honest chats. And I think teams are successful when people have honest chats and understand what makes each other tick and what they can bring to the process. So it's interesting that works. And likewise, I found my proximity to my direct team, in terms of my manager and my colleagues who work directly next to me, we're working more closely than I ever have in my career. But beyond that bubble of my immediate team, now I'm finding myself more distant from everybody else. And I think of, I'm sure we'll touch on it in another point, but of all the people I'd normally bump into or say hello or get introduced to, it just doesn't happen now. And I think that for me, I've been working long enough now that I've got that network, so I know where to go to. But I do feel sorry for people at the moment who are losing that opportunity to just meet new people.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. So Shireen, I'm going to build on that one a little bit. So part of some of my research and getting ready for this panel, I think I know a lot about millennials now, by the way, reading for hours about a lot of it. But there was a study done around there's signs of tension, right? And 38% of millennials said that older senior management didn't relate to younger workers. But then on the flip side, I find it really interesting that both of you have touched on the fact that actually some of the stereotypes around millennials, that is, I want to work from home and I want my flexibility and, I kind of want it all, that actually you're both saying, I do kind of miss that office environment, right? I do miss that personal touch. And so let's not forget about that either. It's not all wonderful all the time working from home, and especially when you're not fully established perhaps in your career, or you're trying to, make progression in your career. So Shireen, I'm going to ask a little bit of a different question to you around, and Will kind of touched on it, your access to role models, your access to mentors, to CEOs and to, people that you might just brush, shoulders with in a hallway that, you might say hello to, you might be making a cup of coffee next to them. How has this changed, kind of that interaction? How do you engage with senior people now? Is that a struggle? And is it all negative? Is there some positives to take away from it? This is kind of a loaded question. I get it, but just in general, perhaps even your view around what can we do as more senior members of staff, right, to make sure that we're still having that brush of a shoulder, and that you're still feeling that we are there, to make that cup of coffee next to you and to say, how's your day, and to learn about somebody on a more personal level. Because I agree with Will that that's so important, right? And people, feel a lot differently when I send a terse email when they've had a cup of coffee next to me and they hear my day about my, 4 children running around like crazy people. It puts it in perspective a little bit. So, can I just have maybe your commentary, your thoughts on, do you miss that? And maybe perhaps what can companies and some of us in the industry do in these crazy times that might not go away for some time to make sure that you're still kind of engaged from a senior management perspective?
It's an interesting question. The reason that my approach to it is slightly different is because in my role, from the minute I started, I was around senior management, and I was very scared of what I was going to say, what I should be saying, just so many different things. And I was obviously learning about the insurance industry at the same time. So now that I've been in it for a few years now, speaking to senior management is not a problem for me. And, I can drop them an email and all sorts of things. However, there's nothing better than being able to be on an open plan floor and being able to go to that senior management or that head of this line of business or COO, CEO, and talk to them on the floor, because it's one, less daunting. Is like in the moment, you can just do it, and it's easy, it's fresh, it makes sense, it's genuine. That's the word I'm looking for. It's genuine. Sometimes that can get lost through technology, and I have definitely realized that working from home, if I get something through Skype, or I get something, or a call, or I get something through email, I'm automatically in work mode. I don't think it's going to be a, hi, how are you doing? How's just life? It's always I always just assume, okay, they probably need something. And even when they do email, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, hey, how are you doing? How can I help? And so that's what I'm saying. Sometimes I do feel like through technology, it does get lost. And that's the thing that's such a shame. And I think one of the ways that, we managed to combat this at AIG was having like coffee sessions where you can join basically like this, like a video kind of conference call, and everyone can talk about anything really. It just doesn't have to be about work, and it was pretty much open to a lot of people to be able to join. And I love that, because it gave us the ability to be able to do what technology sometimes can't, which is give people that space to be like, this isn't just about work, this is also about how I'm doing. And we've spoken quite a bit about working from home and work-life balance, and one thing is important to touch on is that this isn't happening because we wanted it to, or the whole world said, let's change this. It's happening because, unfortunately, we've been forced to, because of the circumstances that the world has right now. And that's also going to bring out a lot of anxiety from a lot of people. So having these opportunities to be able to reach out in a different setting is really important, with senior management as well, because they're people too, and they have a lot of things that they also just want to talk about, like what they had for breakfast, or kids running around, or how they like to just go shopping and not be around the kids for a second, So I think sometimes we sometimes need to not look at them as senior management, and just as people who are probably struggling to adapt, just like we all are. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. I think you're absolutely dead on. I think we have to remember it, that behind all of this senior management that's so scary, everybody's going through the same thing at the same times, and the struggle is the same, probably regardless of what generation or what level you are, and just kind of making sure that we do those reach outs. I love the coffee morning. That's a good idea. Yeah. I might steal that one. So we're going to change topics a little bit and kind of move away, perhaps totally pandemic and home life, balance, etc. Crossing borders. This was another area that in some of the studies that I've read prepping for this, it shows that millennials would want to move to countries like the US, although we'll leave that out of the picture for right now. I'm teasing. UK and Australia, to further advance their careers. Obviously, I'm from the US. I'm here in the UK, so I I'm not a millennial, but I apparently fall into this category in this question, right? But I'm going to take a different spin on it, because while everybody thinks that being an expat is so glamorous, and I might be here to say otherwise at some times, I'm looking at it more from the idea of, has this whole new way of working and everything that we're becoming adapted to from a technology perspective, and do you think that as a younger employee that it should change, or it will change perhaps, the way companies should recruit and look at talent? Meaning, maybe I don't care where you live, right? Does it actually matter now, right? Therefore, it would open up huge boundaries for work, right? And for companies, it would be a bit like, well, you can kind of work anywhere right now during a pandemic. Like, have we shown that perhaps we should be doing that? And therefore, maybe it's not just UK-based companies you have to look at, or perhaps it's not just a multinational, that you can actually throw your hat in the ring for a job anywhere. So Will, maybe if I start with you on that, do you think it should, or will, it change it, or should it change it really at the end of the day in the way we recruit young talent into the industry?
So in terms of should it, absolutely. I think will it, I question more, but I'll to go into should it and why. Kind of as I alluded to earlier, the best teams have people from all kinds of different backgrounds that have all kinds of different skill sets, because we all learn from each other, and there's nothing more important than having teams that have different points of view, different experiences. The world's more connected than ever. Kind of globalization has happened. I don't think it's going to turn backwards. So I think with any product, with anything you're doing, you need to take a global view, and we all have our views of what different parts of the world are like, but quite frankly, that it's all formed, unless you've been, and even if you've been somewhere, it might be a holiday, you might have traveled around, we don't really know what it's like on the ground anywhere, and the best people to tell us are the people who are there, or a nice flight somewhere now and again is always nice, but I think building teams that are multidiscipline from different parts of the world, I genuinely believe there's no reason why somebody based in the UK would be any better or worse for doing a job than somebody on the complete opposite side of the world. And more importantly, I think we can learn from them. I think there clearly is limits in practicality of how you actually make that happen. But again, it can be about building hubs in different regions that collectively work together. So if there is a will to make it happen, which I think there should be, I think it can happen. I think the single biggest challenge to that happening is countries on a whole level and regions aren't built for that to happen, really. I mean, with different tax regimes and the likes, I think business might be overtaking what countries are ready to do, and I think that's kind of some of the challenges we see around the world with governments, where they can see the world's moving faster than maybe they understand, and I don't think that particularly helps. That often world leaders can be older and maybe don't necessarily understand these challenges, and they see the world from a different place. So we can all learn from everyone, and I think that the more people you expose yourself to, the more you learn. And yeah, absolutely, we should. Why not? I mean, I've worked in global teams for the last 4 years, and even, to be honest, even on my watch, it's got the time in Philadelphia, because it's part of the world I need to think about. And when I check the news, you think about what's going on in different parts of the world. So not only am I getting other people's experiences and their views on it, I'm expanding my own mind. So yeah, absolutely. Providing the frameworks there, that means it doesn't have to matter. I don't think we should ever limit ourselves by geography.
I think it's the exposure, right? So I love you for bringing up my hometown. So thank you. I have my watch set to Philly time as well, for the record. But I think it's around that exposure, right? So, Shireen, maybe I can build off of what Will's saying a little bit, right, around the idea that, yep, there's tax implications and all of that great stuff. But, you know, as a millennial and as a younger generation, you know, do you think that you guys want that exposure, right? And, you know, would you raise your hand as an example, you know, to be exposed from a global perspective to that? And, you know, barring the fact that maybe you live in the UK, opening up the doors for you to perhaps have insight into the US insurance market or into the European one or into the Asian market. It appears from some studies that your generation's really hungry for that, but obviously with the economy as well, expat packages and all of those things are kind of a bit, you know, on the back burner. So, you know, are there ways you think that our industry or in general, we can cater to some of that to give you that exposure, given this new kind of technology platform, et cetera? And do you have any ideas perhaps on ways that you can kind of further your career from an international perspective and perhaps from even an expat perspective, but still kind of stay put in your own location and feel like that's something that's resume building and important to you and to your generation?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Kristen. So again, a really interesting question. And I think William said something which is bang on. He said that I think that the leaders and countries aren't ready for it. It's not businesses. I think businesses can do it. It's the leaders in the countries, and I think it's because of how much a shift like that would impact countries. Good example is like London or New York, right? It's the hub, it's where it's all happening with businesses. Now, let's say everyone could work from wherever. That would kind of pretty much crumble. And that's the fear. It's not that the businesses can't do it. And I think that if businesses could do it and, you know, got the go ahead to be able to do that, the first people they would be sending would be me and Will, because I don't see any millennials who are going to be saying no to traveling at all. You know, when I started at AIG and they said to me that I would have the opportunity to travel, I was ready. I had my bags packed. I didn't even know where I was going. I was so ready. And again, I think it definitely falls down to that wanting more. Like we always want more. We always want different. We're ready for it. Like we're hungry for it. We're hungry for difference. And you know, you said what would be an interesting way of us being able to do that. And I think a good way is projects. If you look at it, a lot of the things we do in bite size. You know, there's not many of us, unless you're working mostly in operations or finance, that are doing things the same thing continuously. It does change at some point, whether you're looking at a specific line of business or class, or, you know, you're looking at a new client or you're looking at a new brokerage, whatever it may be, it will happen in kind of bite size. And those are the moments that you can take the time to travel. So if you're focusing on, you know, in APAC, you know, Asia, that's the moment to travel. And then when it ends, you can come back. And, you know, when that happens and that finishes and you need to be in Europe, you get to travel and come back. So it keeps that bridge and relationship between home as well and travel and traveling out as well. I think if someone said to me, do you want to move country completely? Then I would second guess. But if someone said, do you want to go to this country every 3 months or every 6 months? I'd be like, yeah, sure. Just tell me when. And I think that does also show that, you know, regardless, there's still there's that meaning of home, and, you know, wanting to be able to say I'm part of the London office, and I'm part of wherever you are based. You want to be a part of that, because like anything in life, you still want to have a home, you know, and that's the same with work. That's the same with anything. And if you don't, sometimes you can feel a bit lost. So I think it's still, despite wanting to travel and the need to be able to travel, it's definitely important to still have that place that you can call home. And I think that traveling would do wonders for the insurance industry. Obviously, insurance is international, you know, it's everything. in space, let's be honest. You can even install things in space, it's everywhere. But because of that, we have to realize that there's opportunities that we can always be tapping into. Doesn't matter what insurance company it is, we all have our strengths, but we also have our weaknesses. And sometimes those weaknesses can be built and enhanced by traveling and going out and seeing what other areas we can explore. So what better way than traveling, going there, seeing it. When I did my master's in international business, one of the most interesting parts for me was marketing. I had to do a module in marketing, and within that we got to learn about the difference and dynamics from different countries, down to culture, everything. It was completely different, from the way you give a gift to the way you say hi to the way you say, do you want lunch? You know, completely different. And you know, as everyone knows, when it comes to building, getting business, building relationships with client is number one. And what better way to learn to do that in the best way possible, but actually traveling. So yeah.
Oh, it's really good. I'm gonna hone in on something that you said around career progression and being hungry, and you know, kind of wanting that next step, which sometimes, frankly, I think your generation is criticized a bit for, perhaps unfairly, around being too hungry, or you know, kind of always wanting something new. 38% of millennials who are currently working said they were actively looking for a different role, and 43% said they're open to offers at any given point in time. And only 18% said that they expected to stay with their current employer for the long term, right? And that's a major shift from generations above you, right? Around, you know, the longevity. I've been here for 20, 25 years, and I'm loyal to my employer. So in a survey that was conducted by PwC, they ranked, essentially, they did a survey of thousands of millennials, and they basically said, these are the top 3 things, okay, that millennials have said that they believe makes an organization an attractive employer to them. So I'm going to ask your thoughts on this ranking, and if you would change it or add anything to them. So the number 1 attractive, you know, piece of for them was opportunities for career progression. The second one was a competitive wage and other monetary incentives. And the third one was excellent training and development programs. And what I can tell you is, on that survey, they're listed out about 10 or 12, but those 3 were the highest percentages by far. And ironically, work-life balance was actually towards the bottom, and other things. So Will, if I could start with you around that, right? So opportunities for career progression being like the number 1 things that somebody, you know, millennials have said they wanted. Then wages and monetary incentives might be nice. And then excellent training and development programs. You know, do you think you agree with the, you know, with the survey and the rest of your millennials, or is there anything that you might add to all of that that you think is important as a young professional?
Yeah, I mean, by and large, I'd say that it probably is the 3 factors. I think to address the elephant in the room, of course, comp's important. Of course it is. We can all pretend it's not, but obviously it is. But I think so. If I do a top 3, ignoring compensation, working on the basis that it's a given, I think what I'd add to it would be interest in the project. I think for me, the single most important thing for me in the workplace is I have to believe in what I'm doing, and I have to believe that I'm going to be adding something by turning up every day. From the day I start until the day I stop doing it, I'm going to be adding something and building on what we've done. So for me, what attracts me is it's projects, it's visions, it's understanding how I'd fit into that, and making sure that people understand what my strengths are. I think in kind of the interview process in the old days, it always felt as if you're being interviewed, are you good enough to work at this place? I think it's actually far more important to ask yourself the question, is this the right fit for me? And satisfy yourself with that. And I think progression probably goes hand in hand with the project. I think you're going to want to feel that you'll be able to influence whatever that project is, but also that if it's successful, you'll have the opportunity to grow with it or expand into different verticals. So I think, by the way, training as well and development, it all comes hand in hand together. I think training can be a huge shock when you come from education into the workplace, because I think to draw back to the question we spoke about earlier, we were always told at school, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket. I remember that kind of why do I have to do this maths? You're never going to have a calculator in your pocket. Well, we do now. We have the entire world in our pocket. And that's what kind of frightens me about the generation that comes beyond us, because I think we're kind of in this limbo stage where our education systems almost taught us are about IQ, and you need to learn to recall facts. And then I think as you come into the workplace, you realise it's actually about being able to complete tasks and have to think outside the box. It's not, oh, here's a list of questions, answer them. It's kind of, here's a problem, go and solve it. And certainly my memory of education was I always did well in exams because I knew how to cram. I could write everything down on a sheet of paper and remember it. So I was quite fortunate in that regard. And I know some people aren't so fortunate in having that skill. And I think the most important thing for us to learn is how to solve problems and how to learn, actually, rather than just to learn a fact. Because as I say, facts are a bygone era now in terms of needing to remember them. You can find them quite easily. So it's about coming up with solutions. So to go back to the question, I think that would broadly match up with my view of what's important, albeit I also think I really need to understand how I'd fit into the puzzle.
Yeah, to feel a bit valued, right, at the end of the day, and to understand what you're bringing to the table is valued.
Yeah, I think it's feeling valued, but also feeling that you're giving value.
Yeah, I love that. Shireen, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a different question to that. And maybe both of you might have a commentary on this as we start to wrap up here in a few minutes. But to bring it back to our industry, right? We're here today and we're honoring some really lovely women in the market and across EMEA. How do we make sure that insurance is enticing to your generation and the generation that's about to come, right? There's a lot of talk around how many people are about to retire, and there's a gap, right, in the talent pool. Insurance isn't that exciting. I'm sure we can all sit here and share stories. I think I said to you guys on the phone this week, like, no idea how I ended up here. Yeah. But here I am, right? I'm a lawyer by trade. Whoever thought I'd be in insurance? Not me. But we all love it once we get here. But it's not this really enticing kind of, career sometimes for younger people. So how do we get your generation and maybe below into insurance? And then how do we keep you here long term, forever, and bring you up in the business so that you are the future leaders of this industry?
Great question. I love this question because it's something that I hold quite close to my heart, because I do quite a few things in my own time to get which my answer is exposure. That is what we need to do more. We need to expose ourselves as an industry. I think we just get on with it. I think it's like once you're in, it's like this whole world, but then no one who's in it really talks about it. We don't talk about it when we go home. We don't talk about it to younger family members or anything like that. We just think it's probably going to go way over their heads, and that's it, and that's where we're going wrong, because there's obviously, we work in financial services as you say it, but like things like banking, that's prominent and known for a lot of younger people because of something that their parents tell them they've always should traditionally kind of get into, or being a doctor. But another thing is the TV. You see people who are bankers on the TV, what they do, it looks really exciting. Doctors, it looks great on Grey's Anatomy, all these things. So you're like, yeah, I want to do that. When do you ever see anyone in insurance on TV? You don't. Unless they're knocked at the door and they're selling car insurance or something, you don't see it, or home insurance. And that's the issue. We need to change the way our industry is looked at from an outside perspective, because actually it's incredible. My own experience of getting into the insurance industry was that at AIG they host these into insurance insight days, which they get students to come and see what it's like. And I was blown away. I was like, this looks great. And that's when my journey to get into insurance started. And it started in my second year of uni. And then obviously I got the internship in my final year and so forth. And now I'm here. And now I do the same thing. I go out and I do these into insurance webinars during lockdown, still been doing it during lockdown, where, you know, group of students from all different unis come on and I tell them about insurance. I tell them how far insurance can go. And no matter what you're passionate about, you can get into insurance. If you're passionate about the environment, go in, or politics, go into political risk. If you're interested in about the energy or environment, go into there's so many areas that you can go into. If you want to help people, you want to try and find ways to help people, there's casualty, there's A&H, there's so much. You can add your passion into insurance. If you love numbers, actuary, we've you know, it's the world really is your oyster in the insurance industry, and that's what we need to teach. And we need to teach them why it's exciting and how it benefits the world. Will said that one of the most important things to people, or himself, is that they want to see how they're valued and what they're bringing to the workplace. And that starts from the very beginning, or even looking for a job. When you feel like you're bringing something to the world, you're more likely to love it and put more drive into it. So if we can show them the way that insurance is helping people, not just businesses, people, small businesses, everyday people just walking around, then they will understand why it's such a great place to come. And that's what I genuinely think. I think talking, next time someone asks you what you do for a living, tell them, and tell them in detail, and tell them how it benefits the world, not the business, the world. And see how their eyes change, and how they're like, wow, I never knew that. I never knew if you predicted how many hurricanes had happened over the past 10 years, you could work out what it's going to be like. I never knew they even had jobs like that. You know, and give them, and all it takes is just to plant that seed. That's it. Just plant that seed. And you never know, that kid might go to the next year, final year of university, and think, I'm thinking of going into this, but I remember that conversation I had. And that sounded really interesting. Let me Google. And there you go. You never know. And I think that's what we really need to do. We need to gain and push exposure into what we really do. Be proud of what you do. I think people in insurance love what they do, but I don't think they're proud. I think they're very much like, yeah, I do this really technical job. Don't worry about it. You know, be proud of what you do. Tell them, because you just never know.
Yeah, I love that. I might have you come explain to my parents what I do.
Yeah.
Because I think they're still confused 20 years later. And my kids, they're not really sure either. Will, do you have anything else to expand upon that, perhaps around, you know, kind of where you see this all?
That's because that's quite inspirational. I think you're quite right, though. Obviously, we all end up shying away from what we do, but I think typically because we presume people think what we do is boring. I can tell you, I've heard over the years enough about plenty of other boring jobs, so I think we can definitely do more to promote what we do. I do feel that there is an issue of kind of a barrier to entry. I think that the skills required in the industry can be acquired through industry qualifications. It's not an industry that you need to come from. I mean, I kind of think of it as a bit of an industry of when you've grown up and you don't know what to do, and you look around and they say you need different qualifications to do different things. Quite a lot of people end up pointed at insurance, and then most people who go into it never come out of it. they go in and they love it because they see all the variety of the job. But in my experience, I remember the application process into the market being incredibly onerous, and I think we can turn people away before they've had a chance to look at it. I think far more interesting ways to assess candidates would be kind of not which of these triangles is different. It would be kind of, here's a scenario, what would you do? And I understand that they have to qualify people in and out because the number of applicants, but I'm sure it'd be more interesting for everyone if it said, for example, here's a claim or here's a risk, what do you think we should do? I think that's a more interesting way to learn about people. As I say, people when they come in the industry, they tend to stay. I don't see many people ever leave. I think, like many industries, we have a loyalty issue in that people often think you need to move around to move up. I think companies could do more to promote internally, and a shout out to Crawford. They've done a superb job over kind of the last 18 months of really focusing on developing people, and every time we see kind of a new role, it's someone we already know, which is great. So they're great at giving people opportunity. But beyond that, I don't know why. It's a bit of a for something that is interesting and varied. It's kind of mad that we don't get more people knocking on the door. I'm sure it's. I haven't done the jobs, but I'm sure it's a lot more interesting than a lot of the jobs out there that are considered to be sexier.
I think this could be an entire topic probably on its own for its own panel. So perhaps maybe next year we need to think about that, because this can go a lot of different directions as well around the demographic and diversity, you know, from a lot of different angles around attracting that talent into the insurance industry, and you know, kind of what we need to do better, frankly, you know, as an industry to start bringing up you know, a bit more kind of, you know, diverse workforce as well. But we'll save that for another day. I think we've only got a few minutes left here, so I'm gonna ask you guys to kind of wrap up on this last question, you know, maybe a minute or two each. And that really is kind of, you know, I've loved today's discussion, by the way. Thank you both so much for being so open and honest. I've learned a lot in prepping for this, frankly, and I've learned a lot today as well that I will take with me as a leader in the industry. But if you had to you know, tell the audience, right, what you guys believe maybe is a key takeaway or takeaways for leaders, you know, and what do we need to do to focus on as we move forward with 50% of our workforce being kind of in your generation? You know, is there a message that you want to deliver, or is there one key factor or key takeaway for us to kind of keep in mind as we move past this panel, and perhaps that can stick with us, you know, as we go through our careers and trying to bring your generation up through the ranks? Shireen, I'll start with you.
Oh, okay. One thing, I think the best way to be able to know if not just the millennial, but anyone will want to, you know, join into the insurance industry or stay, is to look for leaders to look at the company they're working at and say, would I want to bring someone I know close to this company? Do I feel like this company invests in their future? Because that's what millennials are. That's what we are. We are the future. You know, and so that's what you have to think. Like, do I think that this place is good enough for the future to come and thrive? And if the answer is no, then find the why it's not, why it's a no, and work on that. And I genuinely feel like when you work on that, then we will flock in numbers. Because, you know, something I always hear people say is that, oh, millennials, they're very impatient, they want everything now. And, you know, maybe they're right. But I think we're kind of smart, and I think we have the ability to predict where things are going well, which is probably why we jump around, because we see what's going well and we're quick to jump onto that because we want to be a part of that. So, if you want the millennials to be jumping onto your bandwagon, figure out what is it that makes it worth that. I think that's the best takeaway I could give.
I love that. Honesty. Maybe that's the key takeaway, right? Honesty as leaders to go, okay, what are we doing well? What can we do better? And how do I make this a workplace that I'm proud of and that I want to give to the next generation, really, and kind of bring them through? I love that. All right, Will, you get the final comment of the day.
Cool. So two from me. One would be take time to explain to people how they fit into the puzzle. Explain what the puzzle is and make them really understand the value they contribute by turning up every day, and that sending their emails or whatever they do results in something tangible. Because otherwise, I think if we're not careful, we can all feel like we're doing a lot and not achieving a lot. And the second point would be let people experience a range of roles within an organization. To give a quick example for myself, I started as an adjuster. I was a terrible adjuster, and I didn't really enjoy it. And I resigned with no job to go to when I was 23, because I knew I didn't want to do it, and that was that. I'll go and find another industry, and I'll go and do that. Through, quite frankly, fortune of bumping into the right people in the corridors, I got moved into a different part of the business, and I really found what I was good at, and it's allowed me to grow into where I am today. And for me, it's kind of mad the amount of people we must lose because we try and put them in a box. It doesn't work, and off they trot. And that just seems a massive shame, because our loss is somebody else's gain.
I love that. Thank you, Will. I think that's it for today. I think we are out of time or over time. So thanks to you both so much for being here today. You guys have inspired me a little bit. It's really nice to see what the next generation is going to bring to the table. I really appreciate everything. Thanks for being with us. I hope everybody in the audience also enjoyed our conversation today. Best of luck to you both. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kristen.
Cheers.